Okay, so we've been talking about choosing a partner, and one of the major criteria for choosing a life partner is somebody that you can resolve conflict with, that you can have discussions, open discussions about problems, about things that are bothering you, and that you can come to some resolution and move on and feel like you're being heard, feel like you're being supported, and so forth.
Right, absolutely. It's so important. Gosh, we cannot stress this enough. Like the other day we sat down and I was having a problem because spring is here and you tend to be more relaxed about life than I am, and this is always the case. Roger and I are quite opposite, actually. We had a little discussion around the door being open when the bug season starts, and it has started. So I came outside and I said, I want to talk to you about maybe closing the doors now. During the earlier spring, it was fine leaving the doors open because the bugs weren't out. But now they're out and we're getting flies in the house, and I cannot stand to have flies on my food in the kitchen when I'm preparing food. So, okay, this is big for me, big. So I asked you if you would talk to me about it, and we could do a goals, rules, and procedures kind of thing, which you will explain here shortly, as to how we can meet one another on this subject. And to you, it really is like, what's the purpose? To you, it's not that important, but to me it is. So how did we solve this?
Well, we may want to hold the specifics on that until we've talked about what you're meaning by the goals, rules, and procedures.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So we can revisit what happened.
Okay, that's fine.
But I think, once again, it gets back to you could let it go and close the door for me. But every time you close the door, you're thinking, why can't he close the door? We got these flies in the house, or these bugs, or whatever. Why does he always leave the door open? And it's interesting because you had mentioned it a few times, but in my mind, it's like, well, how long? I'm going back in the house, so what's the big deal if I leave the door open?
I know.
But then I'll get sidetracked and maybe I'll be out here for a half hour before I go back in, so the door's open for a half hour. Or I look at how wide it's open. I leave it open maybe 10 inches, and that's enough room for the cats to get in and out, because they want to get in and out, okay? And I'm thinking, well, that's okay. 10 inches is okay. But having it wide open is not okay.
These are the kinds of things we argue
right?
about.
So you say to me, oh, could you keep the door closed or whatever? And I may respond, I may not respond. I may be listening to you, I may not be listening to you. I may hear one thing, but it's not exactly what you meant. And if we don't somehow clarify it, it just goes on and on and on and on.
That's true.
And then after a while, you're nagging me about closing the door,
and getting angry.
Like, yeah. And I'm just like, what's the big deal? And we never get it resolved. It's a little issue, but it becomes a big issue.
Right.
So this whole process of goals, roles, and procedures is a very simple process that you can go through when you have a conflict and you want to resolve the conflict. And the question always is, in choosing a life partner, is whatever process you use, either a conscious process or an unconscious process, when conflict comes up, does it get resolved or not? And if you can make this an important criteria in choosing a life partner, I think it's important. And if you can consciously look for the conflict and say, okay, here's an opportunity to really see. Yes. Can we resolve this? Right. And you're continually looking at, okay, did it work? Did it not work? How could we tweak the process to make it work better? But ultimately, it's a huge, huge criteria. If you don't figure out how to resolve the little conflicts and the big conflicts when they come up, you have a real problem if you're going to choose this person as your life partner. Okay, so goals, roles, and procedures. It's 3 things to talk about when you have a conflict and you want to resolve it. So you start by, first of all, saying, can we sit down and talk about a situation? It's important to me. I just like to discuss it. Is this a good time? Do you have time? Now, for Evelyn and I, we actually say goals, roles, and procedures because that's a good way to identify it. So so she said to me yesterday, she said, can we talk about goals, roles, and procedures? Well, I know what that means. What that means is she's got a problem with some behavior of mine. There's something I'm doing that's really irking her, or she doesn't like, or she wants to change, and she wants to talk about it with the goal of, when the conversation is over, we will have come to some agreement on what our procedures are going to be. Because the procedures that are in place, which maybe are not defined, but they just keep happening, are not making her happy, and she'd like to change the procedures. So, we start out by talking about goals. And this is basically, I see that in these situations you tend to do this. So I want to understand why you do that. So what are your goals? Okay? Let me tell you, I have a problem with it because these are my goals. And so we talk about your goals and we talk about my goals. Then we talk about roles. Okay? Because ultimately she feels that it's not her role to close the door after I open it and leave it open. So now we got to talk about roles. And then finally we talk about procedures. Is the procedure we have doesn't work. What is a procedure that we can both agree to that will work in the future?
Right.